Hi. Hello, yes. So today I'm going to talk to you about what it's like being a cultural worker online, in the hopes that me talking about the way we work will be useful to you and the way you will work in the future. Maybe there will be like the odd few bits that you can take away that are useful, or bits that you think, oh, I hate that, I'm never going to do that. But I think that's the best way for me to go about this, because I can't give you blanket rules about how to be an artist online, because I'm not an artist online, and there's no one single way to be an artist online. There's no one single way to do the digital and like do strategy with the digital. Everyone finds a way that's like comfortable for them, intuitive for them. And I imagine a lot of you are like younger than me, so there's like not much I can teach you about using social media that you don't know already. But yeah, hopefully this will still be useful and maybe entertaining. This is an accurate picture of me sat at my desk. So yeah, a bit of background. We started the White Pube when we were still at university. We were in our third year at Central St Martin's, which is an art school based in London in the UK. It's pretty big. It's pretty well known for its fashion course, to be honest. Alexander McQueen studied there. Kanye West tried to study there and didn't get in, famously. But we both were doing a BA in fine art at Central St Martin's, and that is where we met. We were in the same studio group for our second year and third year. And in the third year, we had this like relationship, Gab and I. We had this kind of mutual understanding as like two people that understood each other's practices. We both made art on and about the internet is how I'd phrase it. And it's important for me to clarify that while nowadays it's a little bit trite and a little bit tacky to make like internet art, it was 2015, so this was 6 years ago. I'm aged, you know, I'm elderly, but like back then, back in the day, internet art was cool, and it was like the cutting edge. So it was it was like a new discourse. So tutors didn't quite know what to do with us, either of us, and other students were busy making paintings, and so we were kind of like left to ourselves. But we had this relationship where we trusted each other and understood each other's work and practices in a way that perhaps other people didn't. So when Gab told me, oh, there's an exhibition around the corner from here, it's this artist and maybe you'd like it for this reason, this reason, and this reason, and I thought this, and I wonder if you'd think that as well. It was the kind of thing that I took quite seriously. I listened to her opinion and I valued it, and it had this like weight to me. So I actually did go and see that exhibition. I didn't go to many galleries, but I went to that exhibition because of Gab's recommendation. And I went, had a look around, was looking at the art with her words in mind, and it felt like it had an energy to me because of that. But on the way back, serendipity. It was that time of the week when the Evening Standard, which is a newspaper that is given out for free in London, it's just kind of like it's quite conservative as a newspaper, but it's also quite like crap. It's a bit tabloid, trashy, like a lot of celebrity news, a lot of like populist news reporting. But it was that time of week when they put out their double page culture spread. So they had a couple of art reviews in it at this particular time of the week. And I was on the bus back, got this copy of the Evening Standard, and it had a review of the show I'd just seen in it on the double page art spread. And so it was just like the stars aligned. Those three things were in perfect position. This review, the show I'd just seen, Gab's review, word of mouth, friend to friend, anecdotal, but still kind of informally a review, and then this formalized review that was just a description of what was in the room for 500 words, and then like 3 stars, no explanation. And it just kind of like, I think the timing of that was like celestial alignment. The thing, like the stars just aligned and it all kind of like clicked into place a bit. Because that was then what me and Gab were going to talk about for the day. Took it into the studio and we were both kind of discussing like how it was a bit shit as a review, that like if that Evening Standard review was you know the level of arts criticism at the moment, then like what place did that have in our lives? It was just art journalism really, actually, and that 3 stars didn't really mean too much to us when it came to like deciding whether we wanted to go to the gallery. It didn't really bear any relevance to our evaluation of whether we'd like the show or not, or whether we should like the show or not. And we just kind of like through the conversation got to this place where we were like, we should write art criticism ourselves. If it doesn't mean anything to us, if it doesn't tell us anything new or interesting or informative, then like, you know, what value does the state of art criticism at the moment have in our lives? Absolutely nothing. So there's this gap and we should fill it. We should just do it. Let's do it. And Gab was like, what do we call it? And I said, apparently I screamed. I went, the White Pube. And I think with that name, we were like, that's so good. We've got to do it now. Like that name's too good to not do it. For those of you that don't know or like don't quite understand the joke, the White Cube is a pun based on the white cube, which is, I guess, like that standard, clean, sterile way of viewing art. It's like it's a prescriptive, curatorial format for viewing art. The idea that it should take place within this like sanitized environment, free of context, a perfect, clean white cube. Of course, that idea doesn't really hold any space at the moment, or currently for the past like 30 or 40 years, it's been, you know, pulled apart by theorists and writers and artists, and everyone kind of just generally agrees that it's not a functioning thing. Yet still galleries function in a way that presumes that it should or could exist. The White Cube is also a chain of galleries across the world. So we're taking the piss out of that gallery format, taking the piss out of the chain gallery, that like the commercial gallery that exists, you know, like across the world, and also kind of taking the piss out of like the lack of young voices in the art world, like making fun of the old guard that had white pubes, making fun of the whiteness of the art world, and yeah, a whole bunch of things. Professionalism too. It was just kind of like, yeah, the perfect pun encapsulated. So we started writing, 12th of October 2015, when we were still in 3rd year. And at the beginning, it was kind of just a joke. We were not taking it particularly seriously. We thought we were really funny because this was like a funny name and we were funny guys. And it kind of, it just made sense for us in our minds that this was like an entirely enormous joke. But pretty soon it became, hold on, oh no, how do I, there we are, okay. Oh yeah, pretty soon it became like a little bit bigger than us. This was what the website looked at first like. This is what the website looked like at first. It was, I think you can tell that we made art, like post-internet art, at the time, because this was the kind of like aesthetic of a lot of it, like very kind of early Pixo. I don't know if anyone remembers Pixo. It feels like a little bit of a throwback, a little bit nostalgic, but it was like kind of like early MySpace, a lot of glitter graphics, a lot of GIFs, a lot of like shit, cruddy, pixelated content. And we were just kind of channeling that aesthetic. So aesthetically, this was the crossover between mine and Gabrielle's artistic practices, and it kind of emerged from that place of like visual practice, and quickly pivoted from there, I might add. and I think as well, you can kind of tell that we're taking the piss a bit with it, because this isn't readable at all. People would like click on the website and have absolutely no idea how to access any of the texts, which was something that we at first didn't understand, because in our minds this was a website that made complete sense. Like, oh, of course, there's a hyperlink there. We made it. We know how it worked. We didn't really think too much about how, you know, other people clicking on might find the user interface. Looking back, it is pretty unnavigable. So, oh God, excuse me. So at the moment we exist as writers across these three spaces. The website is the main place where we kind of publish our thoughts in long form. The Instagram is where we take a little bit more of, I was about to say activist. I don't think activist is the right word, but we take a more useful approach to, I guess, problems in the art world, as well as like just distributing the content that we make. But we try and make sure we've got quite a large audience on Instagram. So we try and think about how we are using Instagram a little bit more carefully, try and think about the ways that we can be useful as people who have a platform and can give out a certain degree of visibility on there. We try and think a bit more about how we can use that usefully and be of use to the causes that we care about, and that good stuff, I guess. And then Twitter is just kind of like a shithole. I'm not sure who actively still uses Twitter at the moment, but it just seems to be where people go to shout about things, and I don't like that. So I don't spend too much time on Twitter. I think we just kind of use it to let people know what we're up to and kind of think about our half-baked thoughts. We used to use Twitter and Instagram quite differently. I think as our audience has expanded, we've become a lot less fast and loose with it, because in the beginning, when we only had like maybe 5, 10, 20,000 followers, we could just kind of say things that as they popped off the top of our heads. Like we could say things a little bit facetious, we could be playful, we could be ironic, and we wouldn't have to worry about that margin for error. I think now we've got to the point, especially on Instagram, where we can't really assume our audience's complicity in our agenda, and so we have to be careful to word things a bit more explicitly, and maybe even on Twitter too, we have to word things a bit more explicitly and not leave, you know, the nuance implied. We've been through phases with it as well. On Instagram, we tried to use Instagram once upon a time as a space for criticism. It didn't really go down too well at the time, because I think our audience was a bit bigger than it should have been for those kind of moments. Like there have been moments when we've tried to go around a student exhibition live on Instagram stories, and we've not liked something that we've come across, and students have kind of accused us of cyberbullying, which fair enough. With an audience that's relatively large, I think that can kind of feel true and a little bit uncomfortable. And it's something that we didn't think would be a problem at the time, but now I think we're kind of a bit more aware of it, and it's a bit more difficult to navigate those digital spaces. I guess spontaneously is what I'm trying to say. It's a bit more difficult to navigate those digital spaces spontaneously. But yeah, most of the formal content goes on the website rather than those two, Instagram and Twitter. They can be a bit more specific to deal with, but the website is consistent. At the heart of it all, we are just fundamentally writers, whether that's about like exhibitions and art and artistic practices, or whether that's about video games, which is, I think, what this screenshot is. This is a screenshot of Gab's notes for a review of God of War, which I don't know if anyone plays video games here. I don't, but that was a video game that she reviewed, and like the writing process is something that we are quite interested in, like the process that a text goes through to become a finalized, complete artwork. This is mine, I think. No, this is Gab's folder. It's kind of all over the place. I think we project the image of people that are quite organizationally minded, or a lot larger as an organization than we actually are, for full clarity and transparency. Organizationally speaking, this is just a box room in my mum's house. It's the size of a cupboard. If I reach over here, I can touch the wall. Like, this is the White Pube head office. And like, this is the White Pube back end. Like, it's just us two and an internet connection. That's it. And I think we project the image of like a proper organization with like a HQ, but it's very much not. It can kind of be difficult to span that scale, but we try and be transparent about how it all works. Maybe more specifically for like where you guys are coming from, like as a group of students that are I guess working towards graduation or thinking about graduation as this mad endpoint. The way we kind of saw it when we first started the White Pube as like this new young thing that kind of didn't really have a shape or a place in our artistic practices, but like was just this weird thing, this weird joke, funny thing that we did. It kind of, we had this anxiety around graduating. Like, university was quite nice. Yeah, 3 years, cool. Like, you get a student loan, you get subsidized rent and like a library card and this studio space for free. And it was this safe space where we could just kind of like run around, do what we wanted. But you have to graduate at some point, hopefully, right? Like, that's the whole point of being at uni. You have to graduate. And we didn't quite know, we were like terrified of what happens after it. We didn't know how to run the White Pube as a business. Like, I mean, I say that like we do now, we don't, but yeah, it was this terrifying thing. Like, what was the actual process for being a functioning cultural worker in the UK or in London specifically? Like, how do people do it? And I imagine for you guys, it's a completely different country, so I can only speak for our experience in the UK. What it involved for us was finishing uni, registering as self-employed. In the UK, you have to register as self-employed. You get issued a specific number called a UTR number. That's called a unique taxpayer reference number, and that every year you use that number to file your taxes. So you kind of say, this is how much I earn, this is how much I spent, and that minus that is the amount of profit I made. And depending on that profit number, that's how much tax you pay. All these little jobs that we were doing, kind of talking at this university and like doing things like this, where I talk to people who I can't see, like all of these little jobs were kind of collecting workshops, commissions, bits and bobs. We'd do things as and when, and we'd collect them, write them down, how much we earned, and just kind of figure out the taxes from there. It was a bit of a nightmare at first, but we could kind of do it ourselves, and we didn't really need an accountant. Gab moved back to Liverpool, and we both got part-time jobs to just try and make sure that we weren't reliant on having to find work as writers, and like not having to rely on these random little jobs, because it can be a bit difficult, I think, to make a living at that beginning stage in your career. Hopefully just at that beginning stage in your career, you know, like you hope that it's just the beginning that it's difficult with money. And for us, that beginning stage lasted maybe 4 or 5 years of like not quite knowing where the money is coming from, and it not being enough money to I mean, I say that like it's still like it still isn't significant, or it's not a considerable number coming in for it to be considered full-time employment. I'll get onto the actual figures in a bit. That's why I'm like talking around it, because I will, don't you worry, I will talk about the money. But yeah, so we both got part-time jobs. Gab's first part-time job after graduating, I think, was working in a shoe shop. Mine was working in an office as their like social media intern. I then had a part-time job doing like admin for a travel company, doing marketing for that travel company, and now I work for a sustainable fashion brand / social enterprise based in London. Gab's part-time job at the moment is running, she worked in the shoe shop, and then she worked in partnerships for a charity called Samaritans, which is like a suicide prevention charity. She worked there for 2 years, and then now she runs a gallery in Liverpool called Output, and she is the gallery manager for that gallery. It's a really small gallery, it's just her working there. But it is funded by a larger organization that is like a music venue, music and arts organization. And those are our part-time jobs. We do those kind of 2 to 3 days a week, and then have 2 to 3 days a week doing the White Pube. So yeah, we're still part-time. To supplement all of this like income, we started a Patreon in when was it? November 2016. So about a year after starting the White Pube, we started a Patreon. Patreon is an alternative crowdfunding platform. Basically, a lot of YouTubers use it to, I guess, stabilize their income, so then less reliant on YouTube's ad algorithms for their for their income. It started off quite small. Like you can see there, the first couple months we were pulling in, like the first 6 months, it was maybe around 40, 50, kind of maybe capped at around $200 by until like 2018. And I think around 2018-19 it jumped to maybe 500, maybe 1,000 by 2019. It wasn't really like a full-time, it wasn't like any kind of, we couldn't use it as a salary until maybe August 2019. It has been useful though, because between those 3 sources of income of like small jobs like this, talks, workshops, commissions, bits and bobs, the odd £200, £300 if we're lucky, but like mostly around £250 coming in maybe once every 2 weeks. And then the Patreon kind of being around £500 a month, and then our day jobs paying us, you know, part-time salaries. That's like, that was our monthly income. And then we just kind of balance that for, we've been working at a similar level as that for the past maybe since 2000, since around August 2019. That's been our lives. The proportion of each amount has kind of like swung and gone up. We try to make it work. But yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about those random jobs now, those little odd jobs like talks and bits and bobs. So yeah, this basically is like this kind of talk where I spend a bit of time chatting through the way we work, how we work, and how we kind of make it work. Is probably the thing I spend most of my time doing when it comes to odd jobs like this. It can be a little bit jarring to spend, to earn most of your money talking about what you do rather than earning money doing what you do. But for majority of our career, for, 6 years, that's how we've earned most of our money, through these odd jobs. People seem to be a lot more willing to pay us to tell us how we do things than to like pay us to do things, which makes sense. We are independent, we don't have advertisers, we aren't publicly funded. We kind of exist in this weird liminal space between institutions and artists, and it can be, I think it's a bit difficult for the UK public funding body to fund us in that sense. So this seems to be a concrete way for us to kind of make a little bit of money by talking about what we do. And this is from 2018. So this was like at the beginning of the first 3 years. This is pretty exemplary. Like this is pretty standard for what we'd be doing. Like the jobs were talk for a Q&A for the professional studies module. The Patreon was pulling in around 200 quid. We did a couple of unpaid bits and bobs like NTS in March, which was joining someone for their monthly radio show. It was a little bit less work than we'd probably want to do for an unpaid job. So we took it on because it was like unpaid, but not that much work, and we had fun doing it. So it just felt like a laugh, and we did that. I don't know. I wouldn't normally recommend doing unpaid work. For us, it's been a case of like, you know, maybe a couple of years ago, we would have said, no, we don't want to do unpaid work. We want to focus on paid jobs. But only if we really, really want to do something, basically. If you really, really want to do something, it probably could be worth it. But at the moment, maybe the only unpaid work we'd take on is if it's like a really small organization that can't really afford, like a charity that can't afford, that doesn't really have the budget to dedicate to 2 of us at the same time. And then a couple of other bits. We appeared on some podcasts. We did a job at Rhode Island School of Design. We got flown out for $200 each, which is not that much, but we spent a week in Rhode Island and New York. We definitely spent more than $200 just being there. So we did not actually break even from that job. Like, we spent more money than we earned, but it was just kind of, I think we said yes as an excuse to travel and kind of get out, see the world a bit, see what was going on in New York and Rhode Island, and kind of expand our critical horizons, which has been a bit of a, I guess, a running theme. We've been really keen to travel, even if it's not really worth it money-wise, like that job at the bottom there for Hugh Lane Gallery in Dublin, which was €100, really not worth it, but kind of made a bit of sense to us because we got to go to Dublin. So yeah, that's like the general mix of it. University lectures, a lot of tutorials with students and like studio visits in that sense. We presented at a lot of symposiums, we were on panel talks, we chaired some talks, and like just did these odd jobs where people were like interested in what we were doing, and we'd tell them about it or tell them about this specific thing, this area of expertise that we might have. It was very rare that we would get the chance to be paid to do a review. And I think I'd still say that that stands. It's quite rare that we are paid by an institution or by an individual to do a review, until Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art. So in 2017, maybe like 2 years into what we were doing, we got an email from Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art inviting us up. Middlesbrough is in the north of England. It is a bit far out. It's a bit in the middle of nowhere. It's a city that used to be industrial and is now kind of a little bit forgotten, a little bit impoverished. A lot of people out of jobs, out of work, but there is this quite enormous art gallery there that does a lot of work, I guess distributing cultural money towards social good is how I phrase it, trying to make people in this town feel like they have some kind of ownership over the activity that happens in there, and tries to make sure that the activity that happens there is useful for the people in the town, even if it's just like, you know, distraction or entertainment, or, you know, they try and be a bit more responsive to what these people want to see in the town. They invited us up in 2017 to kind of say, hey, do you want to have a look around? Do you want to see what we're up to? And it was nice. It was a nice visit. It was nice to get our trains paid for. It was nice to get lunch on the gallery. You know, we went around the bookshop and they gave us books that they published, and we were like, oh, we walked away with all this free stuff that we'd just kind of been given, and it was, yeah, nice. Who doesn't want that? You know, it, like, who would say no to these things that were being given to you for free? But it felt a little bit sticky and a little bit awkward and wrong, to be getting all this stuff for free and then to be then writing a review of it. It felt like maybe we should be mentioning that or declaring it. And we were speaking on the train ride back, and Gab, from her job at the charity in partnerships, had this knowledge now. She could write contracts because that was her day job. she spent her day job figuring out how partnerships could work between organizations and charities, or, you know, individuals and charities and organizations, like all these different ways that like organizations could slot in to partner with other bodies. And she was like, maybe we should propose that we be critics in residence. Like maybe we should just formalize this whole relationship. If they want to pay us to come up and write reviews about what they're doing, maybe they should pay us, and then it would be a bit less awkward, because then we could say, oh, they're paying us, like this is happening, this is a formalized relationship, and we don't have to be awkward about it because you know what's going on, we know what's going on, and so do they. And so that's what we did. We kind of propositioned them. We just went to the curator and said, hello, would you like to pay us to review things? And the curator said yes. And it was literally as simple as that. They already knew who we were and what we were like about, where we were writing from, the kind of things we wanted to do politically. And it was quite easy because they were on the same page as us. They had the same kind of politics, the same agenda, and the same concerns. And so it made sense for us to work together in that way and formalize that relationship and be critics in residence. And it was really, yeah, useful and nurturing, beneficial relationship for us, because we were finally being paid to do what we do and write something. And we were quite keen on insisting, and they were absolutely understanding of the fact that we would want to have the condition that we could write whatever we want, whether it was, you know, positive or not. And that was absolutely something that we did. And we were able to then be paid to write whatever we want about these things. It didn't have to be positive. It didn't have to be, you know, just gallery PR. We could be critical. And that was really important and a bit of a step change in our career, especially online. From 2019 to 2020, yeah, the shape of our work changed a lot. The shape of our, I guess, employment and like where the money came from changed a lot. So as you can see, probably from 2016 over on that side to mid 2019, Patreon was kind of maybe maxing out around $500 a month, which is maybe £400 a month. Between two people, that's £200 each, which is not that much. We would, if we were writing for other people and writing texts on a commission, that would be how much we'd charge for maybe 1,000, 1,500 words, considering we were both writing 2 texts a month and putting in, you know, 5 days a week on Instagram and Twitter. Like this was a full-time job. That wasn't significant enough for us to consider it a salary. But at that point in the summer of 2019, I think it just kind of spiked and tanked upwards, and we're at a point now where we could probably call it a decent part-time salary and put aside some money to do other fun things like have a podcast and pay our residents from the Patreon rather than from external sources. We're not quite sure what changed it, to be quite honest. We're not quite sure what initiated that step change. I think the only thing I can think of that we changed up was we became a little bit less nervous about talking about the Patreon, because from 2016 till summer 2019, we were a little bit hesitant to mention it. We'd mention it maybe once a month on Twitter, but it wasn't on the website at the bottom of the page. It wasn't, you know, something that we put on the website visibly. We didn't really talk about the fact that we had a Patreon. We felt a little bit awkward, like, bring it up, but we didn't want to basically rattle the can at people and be like, oh, you can tip us if you want. But I think in 2019 we realized that, like, I think we were both 24, and we were like, oh shit, what are we going to do if, you know, do we continue like this forever, like doing these small odd jobs and like being precarious. Like, do we continue like that forever? And it didn't feel sustainable to continue working in the way we were. We felt like we were aging out of that way of working. And so we thought maybe a nice way to change it would be to rely on our readership a bit more. And so we started putting the link to the Patreon at the bottom of every week's text. We put it on the website in other places, so it was a bit more visible. And we started mentioning it more on Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, it just spiked. I think it was just more visible to our audience, and people were being made aware of it, and they were opting in. And yeah, our readers, it's a really emotional thing. Like, our readers are incredibly generous and support us in a really meaningful way. And it was just about making sure that people knew about it and not being awkward about the money on our end that made it a viable source of income. So yeah, in this period, we were able to focus on writing because we weren't having to rely on these odd jobs. And, you know, we weren't reliant on having to slot all these little jobs in to make a significant amount of income, because the Patreon was taking up that space, and we could use the Patreon to cover the gaps that those odd jobs left. So we could be a bit more selective about the jobs we took on. We could focus on traveling a bit more and not worry about the fact that we weren't breaking even on those jobs. And we could, yeah, spend more time writing at a bit of a larger scale. On our end, what we learned from this, I guess, quite strange trajectory, because yeah, at this point it's been 5.5 years of doing quite weird jobs, talking a lot, being paid to talk about what I do, and then being paid to do what I do through different weird ways. I think that trajectory was worth it because especially the lectures in art schools, it built an invested audience. Like, majority of our audience for the first 5 years were art students, were 18 to 25-year-olds. And as those students graduated and started making money in the art world, they became patrons that valued what we were writing and valued the criticism that we were producing enough to pay for it. Also, you know, it kind of, regardless of, I guess, how awkward it might feel to talk about online audiences like they are somewhat important, it is kind of important for us as, you know, people that need to earn a living online. It was valuable to have a large, invested, engaged audience, because that is valuable to institutions if they are looking for someone to do a talk somewhere. You know, if they're putting on a bit of public program and they want someone to do a talk alongside the program, it made sense to ask those art critics over there who have, you know, this many followers on Instagram, because institutions aren't really able to use social media too well. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but like, digital programs during the pandemic and like over lockdowns have not been too good in the UK. Art galleries kind of struggle with engagement historically, like, you know, not just digitally, like just across the board. When it comes to in-person engagement and also digital engagement, galleries struggle. Like, you know, there isn't a large invested audience in the art world. It's always been a pretty small, pretty exclusive elite group of people that have had a specific kind of education. And for us, that wasn't really the case. You know, we weren't building an audience of like specific niche insiders. We wanted everyone to be able to talk about art. We wanted everyone to be able to enjoy art. We wanted to speak about art in a way that was understandable to people, like actual people, our mums, our families, like our neighbors and the people we grew up with. We wanted to have a conversation about art that was a bit more inclusive, and it managed to build an audience that was wider but also more invested in what we were doing, because it was specific and different to the way that institutions were doing things. And so like the mass of that became quite important. The size of that audience, the investedness of that audience, like the way that they are like highly engaged, and the fact that they are willing to pay us to do the work that we do, that became really important to the way that we work. That and the press that we kind of, I guess, selectively engage with, and being consistently able to write about ourselves in like specifically, because being online is like it's simultaneously like you're exposed to like this thing, this like bizarre anonymous face, where you don't know anyone, but you also are in charge of like presenting yourself. Like everyone else is just like we're like the online is a space where you're constantly having to author your own image, and like in the process of writing and rewriting and constantly rewriting what that self is, you're like fundamentally in control of it to some degree. At times that slips and that becomes something that's outside of your control. And then fundamentally, conceptually speaking, like, you know, it's Instagram is a tech giant. So how in control of it are you? Completely not at all. But the sense of self that you curate online is, you know, within certain limits, authored by yourself. Basically what I'm trying to say in a really long-winded way is that social media became a means for us to carve out the terms of our own independence as cultural workers and as like a criticism platform in a way that I don't think other publishing platforms have been able to without social media. For example, if we existed in print, I don't believe that we would exist in the same way. You know, not only because of the speed of print, like print moves a lot slower. We are able to have a thought and process it into a 2,000 words text over the course of a couple hours and have it at the point of finishing to like publishing in like an hour tops. Like the speed of that rapidity has been really important for us. We've been able to be responsive. For example, when the Black Lives Matter protests happened last summer, institutions spent a lot of time spinning their wheels and putting out holder images of like the black squares. And I don't think those moments were hollow, and I don't think that was like accidental, and it had nothing, the fact that they were hollow and like kind of cynical wasn't because it wasn't because they were unable to respond at speed. You know, it wasn't because of their lack of capacity in any way, but they just weren't able to move with the risk, like with any kind of rapidity and respond meaningfully, quickly, in the way that we could, which was, you know, to ask Black artists if they would like us to host a spreadsheet for them to keep track of institutional responses. We were able to do something useful a bit more quickly than institutions. You know, not just because through capacity, but also because of will, I guess. Like institutions did perhaps want to do that, but yeah, that onlineness has always been a strength rather than a weakness, I think. So at the moment, this is like the wider shape of how we work. We publish a text a week and we take turns. So I publish a text every fortnight, and so does Gab, and it just kind of switches. We post on social media daily. So on Instagram, mainly, that is every day. On Twitter, it's kind of like whenever we feel like it. Most of the time, it's something every day. But if it's not, this cool. We used to publish a podcast every fortnight. We started the podcast back up when we were in lockdown because Zoom exists and people use Zoom to like it's the running joke, right? Like, oh, at what point in lockdown does everyone start a podcast? Like we started a podcast, okay. We had a podcast at the beginning when we were art students in the studio together, and we'd have these conversations. that we thought, oh, someone should be recording this. This is really good. And they were a bit scatty, but we kind of remembered it quite fondly, I think. Like maybe with nostalgia, we remembered it a bit fonder than it actually was. Like maybe it was a bit all over the place. But we brought the podcast back and it's a bit more organized, a bit less chaotic, a bit more coherent now. And we get it transcribed so that it's accessible for people who perhaps do not want to engage with audio as a format. We give out a writer's grant every month. So we partner with Creative Debuts, who are a disruptive funding platform. They also run a Black Artist grant, but this is a specific, that's different. We run a working class writers grant alongside them using their money as a funding pot, and every month we pick a working class writer to give £500 to. We both have day jobs still. So Gab's day job is still working Output Gallery, and my day job is a social enterprise. I do 2 days a week, and she does maybe 3 days a week all in. We do odd little jobs like this in between it all. I think maybe we do one a week. And for full transparency, I am being paid, I think it's around £200. The fee was all inclusive. Like it wasn't like, oh, we'll pay this for you, Serena, and this fee will be the same for Gab. It was like, this is the fee for the lecture and you can split it as you want to. And I think the fee was about £390. I believe, I'm not sure how much that is in euros, or I'm not sure how much that is in anything other than GBP, but about £400. And we decided to split it between us as £200 each, because Gab put together this slideshow, so that's how we're dividing labour. I live at home with my mum and my sister. Gab moved out of her family home in 2019. She moved into her grandma's house to take on caring responsibilities for her grandma. And then because of the pandemic, she had to move out because she was going in and out between work and home, and she wasn't able to keep it COVID secure. So she moved out to live on her own, and now she's moving in with her fiance. And I think they're getting an actual house. So I cannot wait to be her part-time squatter in Liverpool. But for the first couple of years, we both lived with family without having to pay rent for both of us. It's obviously a massive privilege, the fact that we don't have to pay rent and we can live with family that don't need us to help cover mortgages or anything. It's been quite a key part of how we've been able to keep writing as the White Pube and keep this sustainable and not have to worry about money and all of it, because at the end of the day, it's just a couple of odd expenses, paying phone bills and car bills that we have to worry about, and not the roof over our head. I think at this point I probably could move out, financially speaking. I just don't really want to. I like living with my mum and my sister. It's nice to have people around, and I don't think I want to live alone at the moment, especially considering pandemic and lockdown. It's nice to be with family and be able to look after my mum in certain ways. Our office is WhatsApp. I mean this literally, our office is literally WhatsApp. We discuss odd jobs on WhatsApp in between talking, gossiping as friends. It's quite a fluid partnership. We are fundamentally at the base of it all really, really good friends, and it makes the whole process of collaboration really, really easy, because we love and care for each other an incredible amount, and we look after each other in the cheesiest way. Our families know each other now, and I'll go to Liverpool and I will have to go visit Gab's grandma, because otherwise she'll be asking after me, and my grandma, when she calls me up, she will ask about Gab as well. And then we mail out a little gift to our patrons once a month. The gift is up there in the shelf, but like we send out a gift to our Patreon patrons every month to say thank you for supporting us. And it's a nice way to give back a little something and make them feel like, you know, we are grateful for the support that they give us. Other ways we make money, this is like a one-off. This was not like this is not a consistent source of income for us. This was just one little thing that we did. So we made some t-shirts with a screen printing workshop, a small community-run screen printing workshop based in Liverpool called Screen 14. They made these t-shirts for us called that just said critical on them. We made, how many does it say we made of them? 100 of each, and we made quite a lot of money from that. That's not bad. I think, how much was it? Outcome to withdraw and invest. Yeah, we made about £2,000 profit, which wasn't bad. I think we used that money to put back into the idea of merch, and we spent that on getting some face masks made. We got them made by Gabrielle's mum, who has an embroidery machine and has been making masks like throughout the pandemic, and so she made some critical masks for us and some logo masks, and I'm not sure how much money we made from that, but it is all on our website. I should mention we publish our accounts publicly, so you can see how much money we make throughout our entire career history. If that is something that you're interested in, if you want to have a nose and see how much we've been paid to do this talk specifically, it's up there. But I think having a shop where you sell little bits and bobs is quite a good idea, especially at the moment when it's a little bit difficult to make a living as an artist through exhibitions at the moment, specifically because of lockdowns, and also generally because I don't know how many artists actually do make a living from just exhibiting only. Think about it, like you get maybe one exhibition a year. How much do you get paid for that exhibition? Maybe, you know, anywhere between £2,000 to £6,000 as an artist fee, like, you know, £2,000 to £6,000. That is absolutely not even half of a living wage for a year. Like, that is a ridiculous sum of money to try and live on over the course of a year. It's impossible, you can't do it. So how do artists make money? How do they survive? Yeah, they do these little jobs, they kind of talk about things, but I think artists having little shops where they sell little bits is quite a good idea. I've got quite a few bits of little artist merch hanging around. Hold on, good examples for me to pull out at the moment. Like over lockdown, I've spent a lot of my time buying things from artists that sell little bits and bobs. Like prints are a really good idea. Like if you can get some cheap prints made, that's really good. There's I have a lot of prints. There is an artist that makes books. Who'd have thought I'd get the props out, eh? Like there's an artist who made a publication about One Direction, which is really good. Like this was 20 quid. Well spent in my opinion, because it's a bit of art and it's like a book as well. It's like a nice way to engage with the idea of art making. And it comes with stickers, I think. Yes, it came with stickers. So I've got stickers now. And I think stickers and like these little items that are quite cheap to make, but I still feel like worthwhile investments for people, a nice way to buy into your practice. It's a bit easier to sell a sticker than it is to sell a £5,000 painting. And if you sell £5,001 stickers, you've still made £5,000. Like, you know, I think artist shops are a good idea. Maybe that could be a useful way for, I guess, artists to make money digitally. Seems to be something that has been popping up around lockdowns. We also did some billboards around London. I don't know if I've got time to talk about these. No, I don't think I do. But
yeah, sure, go ahead.
All good. Maybe it's worthwhile me talking about these. So we were invited by a creative ad agency called Jack Arts. They're just that's the best way to describe them, a creative street advertising agency, which is a really fancy way to say they're the people that do fun billboards like this. They've done a couple of them around London. They mostly work with galleries and publishing houses to do like creative, fun, cool, edgy campaigns for books and stuff. But they do a project called Your Space or Mine, where they give little bits of billboard space out for free to artists and creatives, so that they can kind of, I don't know, stay relevant, I guess. And so they asked us if we wanted to do some billboards. We said yes, because, you know, that's crazy. So we didn't pay for these billboards and we weren't paid for them, but it still felt like a good idea. I think that there was very little direction in terms of like what they expected from us. They just said, make a billboard, that's it, like carte blanche, I guess. And earlier, maybe at the beginning of lockdown, I wrote a text called Ideas for a New Art World. It was based on a book I read by Lola Olufemi called Feminism Interrupted, Disrupting Power, where she wrote about feminism as an expansive political frame through which you can imagine a new, better future and the small little steps that it would take to get there. And yeah, like Lola's writing just inspired me and really stuck with me, and feels like an important political tool in my thinking now that I've read it. It's like, yeah, changed the way I think a little bit. Really good. Recommend reading it. And it inspired me to write that text and think about the ways that we could imagine a better art world and the small little fixes that we can make to get closer to that more equitable future. A lot of the suggestions I made were kind of economic, or like financial, to do with like, yeah, the financial setup of these institutions. But it set off a chain of thought where Gab and I thought about really easy, common sense ways to fix the art world and fix some of the problems that we ran consistently up against over the course of our careers. So the fact that the Tate, enormous gallery in London and Liverpool, the fact that they have an incredibly racist painting in their basement, kind of painted onto the walls of a restaurant in their basement, that seems like a massive problem, right? Like a really good way to solve that would be to remove the painting. Common sense. Maybe a bit less directly would be universal basic income, so that and affordable housing, so that everyone, including artists, can make a living. Because, you know, it can be really hard to make a living as an artist. Like, how do you make money from being an artist? You sell artwork, you exhibit. Both of those things are really difficult, and they're difficult to do if you've just started. So how are you meant to get started when it's difficult? You know what I mean? It's that, like, it's a vicious circle where there's no specific entry point. And universal basic income would be a little bit of money every month so that people could cover their basic needs, and, you know, affordable housing so that people could afford to keep a roof over their heads, so they wouldn't have to worry about like those basic necessities and keeping themselves alive, and could just make art. And inevitably the art would be a lot better when people aren't worrying about how they're going to keep a roof over their heads and feed their kids. Yeah, simple common sense ideas. So these went out across Liverpool and London at first at the beginning of the year, and a couple of weeks in they rolled them out across the whole of the UK. So they are now in cities like Bristol, Cardiff, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Manchester, Birmingham. They're all over the UK basically. They've been up for 4 months, and the last one, number 6, that pink one, I think went up 2 weeks. Yeah, was it? It went up a month ago. It went up a month ago, and there are still some around the UK now, but yeah, it's pretty much finished. There aren't any new ideas yet. Obviously there are more ideas, but not on billboards, basically. Digitally speaking, for us, quite an important thing was getting a little bit of a facelift. So at the end of mid 2019, I'd say. So just before lockdown, we reached out to a friend of ours called Ahmad Ilyas. He's a graphic designer, and we've known him for a few years. When we went and did that job ages back in Rhode Island, we actually went to New York and met Ahmad in person. And he took us around Chinatown in New York, and like we just spent loads of time together, just bobbing around, having a chat, getting bubble tea, loving life, being pals. And we stayed in touch, and we remembered him when it came around to needing some graphic design, like zhuzhing being done. And so, you know, he'd followed us on Instagram and Twitter for like 4 years. We'd known each other for quite a while, been friends, and had this relationship where he really knew what the White Pube was about. You know, he knew us as people, he knew us as critics, and he knew what politically we wanted from things, and like the aesthetic position we were speaking to. He kind of had an idea of who we were. So we didn't really have to tell him much or give him much direction. He came up with a lot of this just off his own back, and it was like a dream collaboration because yeah, he was able to make a brand design, like a kind of brand identity that just felt like us, but a bit more professional. Like it felt like us, but if we were wearing makeup, like it's still our faces, but like just nicer. I think, like, you know, we just had our, like, this was the website with its eyebrows done, you know, just a little bit of decoration. And I think it's yeah, quite a far cry from like the original website, but still kind of the same aesthetic. Just yeah, a bit sleeker, a bit cleaner. Also like the little pube confetti and in the banner across there, and like the little lucky dip gif, like these are all things that he kind of came up with. Also worth mentioning, we have, as well as the writers grant and the podcast and like these new reviews of video games and writing about food and books and stuff, we also have a successful funding application library. So we collect successful funding applications. So if you write a funding application for a PhD or for public funding from like a state body, we would love to have a copy of your successful funding application, because we have never received public funding, but the process of writing funding applications is hard. And the way that we have learned how to write funding applications for other purposes has been by looking at successful ones from other people. So yeah, in an attempt to level the playing field a little bit and make it a bit easier to secure public funding or just funding in general, we've put together a library so that people can share the resources. And then I think I only want to like kind of just point you towards this, because it might be a bit futile me mentioning it and talking through, because it's written and I don't know how much more I can add. But Gab wrote this in 2018, and I think it's still pretty decent text for me to refer to. She wrote a text called How to Get an Exhibition. And so yeah, as she says, it's a bit of an art world walkthrough of one particular way that we saw as incredibly common, like a way for new graduates to get that first line on their artistic CV, that first like exhibition, like how to go from new graduate to emerging artist, I guess. And a lot of it kind of encompasses how to deal with the digital as an artist. So like, you know, how to make a nice Instagram, how to make yourself an artist website, I guess, or how to approach the idea of having an Instagram or having a Twitter, having a website. So yeah, rather than me spending loads of time chatting about it, I'm just going to direct you to that text because I think it covers it quite well. And obviously, like, there are other ways to go about being an artist online, and you know, there are other paths and other pathways for you to follow. This is just like one way that we saw is increasingly common in the art scenes that we were in and around, and a lot of the ways that she points out and writes around are based on sociability and an artist's ability to be incredibly socially adept, especially online. And I just want to, like, yeah, mention that it's not the only way. It's not, we're not saying that that is like the way that it should be done. It's just the way that a lot of people do it. Yeah, there are many ways to skin a cat, I think. And whatever works for you, I guess. Lots of people have been successful doing different, like, I can't imagine 10 years ago someone giving a lecture about how to be an art critic would have given you like a template for how we do things. So I thoroughly doubt that, actually. So, you know, feel free to disregard literally everything I've said over this past hour and a bit. But hopefully this has been, I guess, an exercise in transparency, if nothing else, and giving you like something to think about in terms of how we work. But yeah, that's it. That's the end. Thank you for listening. I'm gonna stop sharing now. And
so hi, hello. So now please look at the Q&A section. There are some questions waiting for you, and when you open it, you can mark them as answered, and I'm sure there will be more coming up.
oh, okay, I'm just going to start from the beginning on these and work my way down. So feel free to add more as I'm going through.
Yeah, one more. Just could you read it out loud, the questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
When was the moment in your white Pube career that you both realised you were getting famous? Big. Was the indicator the number of followers or their comments / quality of engagement or something different? That's a really good question. Because I think our relationship with I don't know about famous. Like, it's not I wouldn't call myself famous. That's a bit mental. Like, I don't know, like it makes me blush. Like, I don't we are incredibly visible in like a really niche community of people. Like, you know, my dad's got no idea. You know, my dad doesn't know anyone that knows who I am, basically. And I think that would be the point that I'd consider myself famous. Like, if my dad ran into someone that was like, hey, your daughter, like, that's when I'd be like, oh, I'm famous then. Like, all right, cool, big time. But in terms of like big, like visibility wise, I think I'm not sure it's hit home. Like, I don't know if I can like get my head around it, because in my mind, the way I kind of cope with it psychologically, it's like, I just imagine that no one listens to what I say. No one reads the text, no one pays attention. The only person reading it is like Gab and maybe my mum. So like I don't think I've like realized I don't think I've realized yet. But there have been moments when we've kind of like been like, that's a bit, someone, and it's when people recognize us in public. So like, there have been moments when Gab and I have been on the tube, like public transport in London, and someone sitting across from us has said, oh my God, are you so and so? And we're like, yeah, yeah. How did you know? That's quite odd, getting recognized in person. It makes sense if it happens in galleries, because like, I guess that's where you'd expect an art critic to be. But yeah, that in-person moment. The number of followers doesn't ever feel real though. But yeah, good question. I think visibility is a difficult thing to deal with in the art world, because I think often being a successful artist or being a successful art person relies on your willingness to let people see you as a celebrity in a kind of way, which is like, yeah, I don't know if that's a good idea. Like, big artists that are like big names like need to accumulate a level of like social capital and celebrity status, and I think, you know, that shouldn't have to go hand in hand with your success as an artist. Like, it's a career, like, you know, it kind of gets a bit complicated. But yeah, that's a good question. How did you build your audience? Do you concentrate on content only, or do you use any tools, statistics to have a wider reach? So yeah, in my job as, I guess, the social media person for like a travel company, or like a sustainable fashion brand, I use a lot of tools and stats and like marketing tools, right? Like the digital marketing space is like an area where people invest a lot of money in like being seen and fighting for like digital real estate. Notably, the White Pube has never even used a hashtag on Instagram, and it's never been like, we've never set out with the intention of like building an enormous audience. We've always had the mentality of like just being pure chances. We just kind of like plod on, do what we want, and people will just be interested if they're interested. Like, we're not interested in growing an audience specifically, but if an audience is big, it's been helpful. It's one of those things where it's nice if you can get it, but we're not going to split hairs over it if it doesn't happen. And it has happened, so like that's nice, but not necessary. We'd still be doing this 6 years down the line if like 2 people were listening, just because I think, you know, we love having a natter, and like the White Pube is fundamentally a conversation that we're having between our, like, Gab and myself. But yeah, so no tools, no statistics. I'll tell you what we do use. We use a scheduling app now called Buffer, and it means that you can queue up Instagram posts, Twitter posts, to go out just on schedule. So I don't have to use the Instagram app to post on Instagram. It's a nice way to, I guess, handle the sometimes febrile nature of online discourse, because, you know, Instagram's not always been a nice place to us. So sometimes it can be nice to get a bit of distance and just post things, queue up, and it goes out. It can also be handy as, you know, if we're scheduling in reminders, or if we know, you know, on the 1st of May, we need to post about this. So we don't have to like set a timer on our phone. We can just queue it up on the app. That's the only tool we use really. In terms of stats, oh, I tell you what, we, so with the podcast, we thought maybe it might be a good idea to get a sponsor for the podcast. It's really difficult to get a podcast sponsor though, and they really want to know about the podcast statistics, which are not great. Like, they're not like, you know, we're not like podcasting seriously. Like, we're not like, I'm not Joe Rogan. I'm not Blind Boy or like any of these actual serious podcasters. So like, we've been trying to like look at the statistics for them, but they're just like mind bending. We have no idea how to interpret stats when it comes to ourselves. Like, as much as that might be my day job, it's just not something I deal with as the White Pube. So like, short answer, not really. Long answer, kind of, but not to grow an audience. The audience built itself pretty naturally. I say that, and I know that like Instagram's algorithm favors big accounts. So as once we hit about 25,000, it just became a snowball that like kept going, and like we've just been sitting back since then and like watching it kind of snowball. But that process of getting to like 20k took about 3 years. But yeah, all consistently throughout that. It wasn't even like, we didn't even use a hashtag. It was just a stupid thing we did, and it's still pretty much a mystery to us how it's all worked. But yeah, thank you for your question. Do you think there was something particular that led to your breakthrough, or maybe just persistence? I think, yeah, persistence. I think the fact that we are an independent art criticism platform, and the fact that we publish every week, and that we have published every week for a certain amount of time. So there is an enormous, if you just land on the website now, you've never heard of us, you've never been to the website, if you landed on it now, there is a whole fuck ton of texts for you to read. There is loads for you to get stuck into. There is like a whole, like, it's 5.5 years of collected work and texts, and I think there's just a lot of content, and that it's never been about quantity of content. It's not like we're pushing out content for the sake of content. It's always thoughtful content, but we have like a speed and a responsiveness that I think makes just kind of like, yeah, tips the odds in our favor a little bit. So like, yeah, maybe it's persistence, maybe it's just quantity, like maybe it's just volume. But I think at 5.5 years in, anyone would have that volume. Like, you know, 5.5 years into anything, you've probably collected like a fair amount of stuff. I think, oh, maybe a really good shout to mention for this is the point at which we reached that 20,000 followers was, I think we tipped over the edge into that, like, oh, we've got a lot of followers now, because in 2018, the summer of 2018, we were included on the Dazed 100 list. Dazed 100, if you don't know, is a list put together by Dazed and Confused. They're like a cool, edgy, like new media magazine for like art, music, fashion people. And the Dazed 100 is their list of 100 new faces that, like, the concept is like 100 people whose year is this year. Like, they're going to have a big year, predicting like they're going to blow up. And in a way, I don't know if they predicted that we would blow up or if they like ensured that like we saw a large audience of people that were like interested in like the internet and fashion and art, and this, like, they exposed us to a whole audience that was probably really interested in the things we were interested in, and like would have been, yeah, it just kind of, yeah, exposed us to a whole audience that was like our prime audience. So I think that pushed us over the edge into 20,000, and from there it just kind of snowballed. I don't know how they found us though, if you know what I mean. I'm not sure quite what led them to including us on that list. But yeah, good question, thank you. You mentioned you published on the White Pube Instagram daily. What kind of content was it? Daily posts / Insta stories sound pretty time consuming. Did you analyze / prepare things beforehand? Or was this daily social media stuff more of a stream of consciousness? So with it, maybe actually, give me 1 second, sorry, I've been trying to get into my own phone for the past 2 hours, and it says iPhone disabled because I've forgotten my passcode, and so I've just been sat here trying to remember my passcode while I'm speaking. But so I can't show you Instagram because it's locked. But it might be worth going back a couple of years on the Instagram and just having a snoop. But like, if it really interests you. But daily posts kind of can vary from anything. At the moment, it's mostly just like stuff we're working on, like oh, there's this new application on the Founding Library, or, you know, our residents, our homepage residents, like a reminder of the stuff they've got going on, a new podcast episode. It's just like stuff from the wider content stream of stuff we create. It can be a reminder of our Patreon. It's pretty, yeah, at the moment it's pretty work related and pretty self-generated. Out of lockdown or before lockdown, we'd also include like little pictures of exhibitions we'd visited that we perhaps didn't want to write a whole review of. We'd include like talks and like travel and, yeah, like all these events that we would go to or participate in. It was just kind of off the cuff rather than so there was like a bit more of a mix of like, this is what we've got going on, FYI, that's over there, go have a look at that, and like, oh, this is what we're up to. At the moment, maybe it's like a little bit more time consuming to think about things that we can post every day. Sometimes it's literally just gab posting a screenshot of like a game that she's playing at the moment. Or today I Instagrammed a picture of me with I got my COVID vaccination sticker because I got vaccinated at the weekend, and it was just like an update like, oh hey, I got vaccinated, just because I didn't have anything to post today. So I thought I'd mention that like vaccines are good, because maybe, you know, out of 75,000 people, there are people that are a bit hesitant. We also post things that are a little bit more useful for other people. So if there's like a petition that needs signing or like something that needs boosting, we'll pop that on Instagram. We try and look into it a little bit more carefully though, so that we can, rather than just throwing something on Instagram, we can actually do something useful and direct people to do something useful regarding any like activism or campaigning. So that can be the time intensive bit. Otherwise, it just takes like 10 minutes and it's a little bit about planning. I will show maybe actually, oh, actually, I don't know. I don't think I can share my screen when it comes to the calendar, because I think I've got some stuff that I can't show you. But we have got a separate iCal for the Instagram. So we just plot in what we've got. We just plan ahead basically. And sometimes maybe once a month we sit down and plot out the main things that we need to put in. But I think that only applies to us. It's pretty time consuming. It only applies to us because we are a platform rather than an individual, or like, you know, fundamentally we are two individuals, but like we exist as the White Pube, and we have a website and content to kind of dish out. So as an artist, I don't think you have to worry about that. It is pretty time consuming. But I think if we really ran out of stuff to talk about, we would probably slow that down. It's just, we do probably have stuff to talk about once a day. But yeah, we do prepare things beforehand. It started off a little bit more stream of consciousness, and that's a bit more prepared. But I think that's just the nature of things. Are there any artists who you could recommend as good examples of establishing an online presence? This is a really good question. This is a really good question that I don't know. There are artists whose Instagrams I like for entirely different reasons than I think would be helpful for you. I think someone who is really good at self-promotion, not self-promotion in a bad way, but just letting people know what he's up to, and you know, really good at talking about what he does, is Abbas Zahedi. His Instagram is ABBZAH, Abza. I think he's really good, yeah, at letting people know what he's up to, what he's working on, and, you know, making sure that people are like in the loop. And I think it works really well because it works really well because he's a really good artist, and like his work is incredible and just thoughtful, mindful, you know, all of those other good things. But he is also, yeah, really good at Instagram. So maybe looking at his Instagram would be a good idea. But then I don't think that there are artists who function on it, like, you know, on Instagram privately really well, who handle their need for privacy really well. It's perfectly possible to like have a private Instagram that you use for your friends and not really have to deal with like Instagram as a business tool. And I think it'd be unfair of me to point those artists out. Yeah, no, I can't think of anyone that does like a really good job that I can point at other than Abbas. Maybe Ty Shani as well. Ty is really good at like having like a personable sense of self online, and it's like a sense of self that makes sense with her as an artist, and she kind of, yeah, she exists quite authentically online though. I think that's just her. And it's less like she does it consciously, she just is online, and yeah, she just is who she is, and it's just like I just like her as a person, maybe. Like maybe that's it, I just like her as a person, and that's why I like her Instagram. How did you manage to stay motivated with this project? Did you have any moment where you thought it will never take off? No, there wasn't ever, I think, and this is like the key for this like answer. Like, no, we never needed motivation, because it was never about like, you know, we didn't set out with the intention to make it big, or I don't think we have made it big. Like, we've not like hit the big time. I think, and this isn't me being like humble on purpose, like, oh my god, I'm so modest. Like, no, I think like we haven't hit the big time because like I still live at home. Like, I you know, this isn't my full-time job. I haven't, like, I think maybe when I'm able to buy a house in London with like London house prices, I'll be like, that's it, that's the big time. Like, when I have that like deposit on a house money, I'll be able to say like, we've made it. And I think that's the kind of stability and scale that like I have in my mind, as like, I've made it. And it always has been. Like, I've never like the numbers on Instagram don't really make sense, they're not real. Like, they don't like, it's just social capital that's never really materialized to hard capital. So with that, it's like a little bit like, maybe that's like psychologically, it hasn't, in my mind, it hasn't taken off yet. But at the end of the day, like, we never really set out with the intention to be these big art critics that like made it to the big time. We started off as a joke, and it became something that sustained and nourished Gabrielle and myself as creatives, in collaboration and conversation with each other. You know, like we went to art school, and spent 3 years there as practicing artists, making artwork of our own. And as soon as we left art school, neither of us really wanted to make art like ever again. We wanted to write about art instead. And we found this like, we kind of like, we took the long way round to what we actually wanted to do, which was talk about art. But it's like we've hit on something that kind of makes sense as like a creative outlet. Like, we need a creative outlet in some way. We need to like fulfill that like burning desire to like make, and writing seems to be it. So just for the sake of that, like, it's been easy to keep going, because we both love writing. We both love thinking aloud through writing and formalizing our thoughts. Like, it just kind of like the website isn't the only place that we write. Like, we both have writing practices separate to the White Pube, and Gabrielle writes her own games and I write fiction, and it just is something that we just do for the love of it. In terms of staying motivated, we can, like, with this project specifically, the fact that we are in control of it has really helped. So if, for example, at the beginning of lockdown, Gabrielle was not feeling like exhibitions had much value or energy for her, she just stopped writing about exhibitions, and she wrote about what she wanted to, which was video games. And they had energy and weight and power for her, and she, you know, felt excited to write about these things, and she wanted to, you know, think about games in this really critical, analytical way. And it was fun, and it wasn't like she had to keep herself motivated to write about art. She could just pivot. For example, like, I this week don't really want to write about an exhibition too much. I do still write about exhibitions, but like, it's a bit difficult to write about them in lockdown. And rather than try and like motivate myself towards something I don't want to do, I'm just gonna write about something else entirely, and write about a book or the park or something, and not worry too much about keeping on track. Yeah, I think that's a really key point to, like, for me to stress, that if you're struggling with motivation, maybe you just don't want to do it. Like, if you need to keep motivating yourself to do something, maybe it's just not for you. Like in the sense, not in like a bad way, not in like a, oh, give up, but just maybe think about what it is you really want to be doing, rather than that thing you're trying to make yourself do. Because yeah, you can run up against a brick wall as much as you like, but it's a brick wall, it might not give, and you might hurt your head in the process. Did I have any moment where I thought it would never take off? Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't think we rested our hopes on it taking off. So it kind of felt circumstantial. It's a nice thing, but I would like a house. How do you engage audience? Do you exchange emails, message with your followers? Yeah, we try and respond to every email. It's been really hard at the moment because Gab's been on sick leave, but we do try and respond to emails, even if it's just to say thank you for writing, and that's a really nice thing to say. Just because I think that's like a nice thing to do. If someone takes the time to write to us, then you know, honoring them with a reply feels like the right thing to do. It's not something that we do consciously to like cultivate a public or engage an audience. It's just something that I think feels nice. We want to, if people write to us, then because they feel like a proximity to us, like maybe it is better to think about it on the scale of friendship. And we've made so many friends through being the White Pube. There are people that like have become indelible parts of our lives, and you know, people who have shaped our lives. And Gabrielle met her fiance through the White Pube, actually. It's worth me saying, like pretty early on, but like they met through Twitter. They were both in Liverpool, and it was like a pretty small scene, and we only had like 2,000 followers on Twitter, so it wasn't like crazy. But yeah, we meet people, and we've met friends through being the White Pube, so it just kind of makes sense for us to message people and kind of put accounts to faces. It's a bit harder at the moment, I will say, because Gabrielle is off sick and the size of the audience can be a little bit intimidating, but we try our best, and I think that's been helpful. How do you collect and prepare material that you are posting on Instagram? Posting daily something that is valuable seems to be difficult. I think that's pretty similar to the other question, and yeah, I would say we use Buffer and we plan it out on iCal. It can be pretty spontaneous though, like today's I just kind of posted something like off the cuff, and I would say it's not necessarily valuable to everyone, and if it's too difficult, don't push it, because the Instagram algorithm is notoriously horrible to deal with and contend with, and it's something I have to contend with at, like, in my day job at work, to be like, oh my god, are we shadow banned? Like, is that like, just, it's not worth splitting hairs over, and like it's not worth splitting hairs over and getting like emotionally invested in, because it can just flip-flop. We try and keep that pace, like we try and hold ourselves accountable to that pace, just because otherwise stuff builds up and we're like, oh shit, we've forgotten to talk about this, or we've forgotten to talk about that. That's just the pace that works for us. But you know, if we've got nothing, we'll just post a picture of a dog. Like, it's like, it's pretty easy. It's like we try and keep it really chill, and not like lose our minds over it. You said that institutions and galleries are not too good at engaging their audience. Do you have any advice on how to do it well? I think just hire someone younger than the people they are hiring now. Institution marketing departments are run by people in their mid to late 30s at the youngest. There is a lot that they could just solve by getting someone in charge who knows how to use the internet as a native, like a digital native. A lot of the fact that they're bad, like a lot of the way that they're bad at doing things is that like it's just copying marketing departments. Like the gallery marketing departments have something to do, a specific job, which is get like work in a kind of like advertising adjacent role and like get people in through the door, make this exhibition seem really attractive and like fun, and like, don't you want to come? It's really good. Do you want to come to the exhibition? It's amazing. And I think social media could be used a bit more differently. Like it could be used a bit more responsibly. It could be used as a space for artworks in and of itself, and I think that could be engaging. I think it could be used as a space for discussion about like, rather than as a marketing adjacent tool, it could be used as an outreach department adjacent tool to get people talking about the exhibition. But institutions just are not set up to be that responsive because of bureaucracy, because of budget allocation. So my advice on how to do it well would be to start off with that budget allocation and think about who you're paying what, and maybe if you paid some of your younger entry-level staff a bit more money, they'd be able to make decisions that could really benefit you in the long run. So move to a cooperative payment model. It'll kind of, yeah, relook at your structure, because interns do not do the best work when they're unpaid. Artists and art world in general using LinkedIn, good or bad idea? Bad idea, bad idea. I hate LinkedIn. It's such a bad place to be as an artist. I think it maybe makes sense if you are a curator looking for a job in a more professional environment. As an artist, the art world works a bit more socially than professionally, if that makes sense. So it's more about being there in person, like kind of being at the opening. I don't think anyone, I mean, maybe it's just no one I know uses LinkedIn. Maybe there are people where you're at using LinkedIn and it's like a really smart choice. But for me, I hate it. So like my answer's biased. I mean, you can always give it a whack. Why not? What do you think about NFTs? I wrote about NFTs briefly about a month ago in a text called "Can White People Ever Be Radical?" And I think that kind of sums up my position on NFTs in general, which is just, I don't understand it and I do not want to. I don't get cryptocurrency. I'm okay with that. I love the poster project. It's so good. Thank you, Kasia. That's really kind of you to say. Do you think that having an online store by an artist somehow affects their image? In Poland, it's very rare to see an artist who's dealing with contemporary art and running an online store at the same time. I think it's more often in places like New York and London. You could be right. That could be maybe it's like a regional thing. And if it doesn't work for you where you're at, then feel free to disregard it as a suggestion. But online, it is a thing. There are a lot of artists that have Etsy stores. I think maybe I see where you're coming from, where like maybe it might affect your image as like a serious artist, and I think that's fair. And if that's something that affects your ability to get work, then cool, disregard. But it's been, yeah, a pretty decent way for artists in New York and London, I'd say, to make to supplement income throughout the pandemic. What recommendation would you have to an artist wanting to start an online shop? How to make it work properly? There are a lot. So for us, what we did was we run our website on Wix, and Wix has a shop integration. So you can integrate, like on the back end, you can have like a Wix shop page. So we just set up a page on our website, and it was like you pay through PayPal, but like the little shop is on the whitepube.com/shop. How to make it work properly? I think maybe think about platforms that already exist that do it quite well. It could be worth making your own website to set up and run the shop through that. It could be worth using a platform that already exists to make selling as a small/local/independent seller a bit easier. The problem with both of those things is that they will take a commission or a cut of your profit or your sales. Wix, I believe, took, I have no idea how much of a cut Wix took. I don't know why I tried to put a number on it, but the number will be on our accounts if you want to check back and see how much they took. PayPal will also take a cut, but that's just everyone. When you think about things as a business, everyone wants a little piece of it. So it could be a good idea to factor that into the prices that you put on your items and kind of add that on top. How to make it work properly? I think, yeah, invest not just money but time and research in figuring out which platform is best and how you want to go about selling things, and making sure that it works like end to end pretty straightforwardly. if you are setting up your own shop and like building your own website from scratch, I'd really invest a lot of time and effort in user testing it and working with either working with a graphic designer or a web designer that knows what they're doing, or making sure that you know what you're doing, because it's just it's a nightmare when when you're trying to buy something online, it's like, why won't it just take my money? Like, do you not take PayPal in this day and age, really? It can be, I think, that's my advice. Use PayPal or like another payment system that makes it a bit more trustworthy, because buyers, if it's a small shop, you don't want to necessarily put your card details in and get them nicked, but PayPal makes it a bit safer and transactional. Do you follow mostly local art scene? Maybe and appreciate any Polish artists. Oh, I don't follow any. I don't think I do follow any people in the Polish art scene. I know I've got some portfolio consultations tomorrow, so I will hopefully be getting to meet some local artists and getting a little bit of that moment where, before lockdown, we'd travel and we'd have a look around and meet people and see what's going on in the place that we are coming to and speaking at. But I'm woefully ignorant about what's going on in the Polish art scene, and I'm looking forward to finding out. How do you choose your topics? I just figure out whatever's pressing on the shape of my mind at the moment, whether that's, maybe sometimes it's topical and it's like this, everyone's talking about this exhibition in London and I want to throw in my 2p. Or like with the NFTs text, everyone was fucking talking about NFTs, and I was like, I'm gonna write about NFTs then, and like just everyone's talking about it, so I just want to have my say. Sometimes I choose to write about a show that I think not enough people are talking about, and I want to give it some critical attention. Sometimes it's an artist whose work I just really, really love, and I just want to I love it so much, I just want to spend a bit of time thinking about why I love it and putting that into words. It can be a mix of reasons, and it's different each time. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult. Sometimes I do feel like I'm just writing about something for the sake of writing about something. But even then, I think it's interesting as a writing exercise. So yeah, I really like writing. It's like a nice way for me to spend my time. It's nice to organize my thoughts in that way. And so choosing the topic is almost like the easiest part of the question. It's like that's the no-brainer bit. It doesn't matter what answer I choose in terms of the question of what am I going to write about. The answer to that is kind of circumstantial. It's the bit that I worry about is the writing, and that's the bit that can kind of takes up most of my brain space. In your opinion, how is the art world going to change after the pandemic? Do you predict any lasting effect? I think this is a really good question. I think there are two answers. One of them is the answer I really want to be true, and the answer that I think is most likely. Is that true? No, I think there are two answers. One of them is the one that I really wish was true and that I think is unlikely. The other one is one that I'm really unhappy with and that I think is likely. And the answer that I wish was true would be I really hope that the pandemic affects the art world in a meaningful way. I wish it would kind of make institutions look at the way they run things, look at the shape of themselves, and think about front of house staff who have been on minimum wages, 0-hour contracts, precarious and underpaid, and forced on the front lines to put their lives and the lives of their families at risk for little to nothing in return. And they've been all the institutions in London have been making front of house staff redundant, they mean nothing, despite the fact they continue to put their lives on the line. For what? At this point, it's just art. These institutions aren't even open in any meaningful way. They're still financially struggling. So literally, why are they getting people to put their lives on the line and then they just treat them like they're disposable? I wish that would change. I wish the pandemic would force institutions to look at themselves and the shape of themselves and pay front of house staff equitably, think a bit more meaningfully about their structure and why directors have 6-figure salaries and cleaners have outsourced jobs run through private companies so that they can pay them below minimum wage. I wish that this way of like doing talks where and events programming where it's online, and that's a way to make things accessible to those who cannot be there in person. I wish that that was something that stuck around when we came to talk about like disability and access needs and access requirements. And I wish subtitling was a bit more common and used, and I wish institutions engaged with that more meaningfully. I don't think it will, though. I don't think the pandemic will affect any of the way things are currently done. I think institutions will go pretty quickly back to the way things were. I think they'll spend a bit of time, maybe a year, thinking about lessons learned from the pandemic. They'll do like a bit of public program about it, but fundamentally, I think things will go back to the way they were by 2022. If the pandemic is over by then, unless it, it might drag on. I don't know. Yeah, that question, like maybe that question, my answer to that question is like assuming that there is an after the pandemic. Like maybe there won't be, maybe it'll kill us all. You don't know. First of all, thank you for your talk. No, thank you for your question. I would like to ask, how do you feel about online exhibitions? Do you think it's worth waiting for the restrictions to be lifted, or is it better to revise concepts to enhance digital access? Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think this was a question that people were asking themselves this time last year, like maybe a month or two into pandemic / lockdown, and they were like, oh, maybe we should hold off, like maybe actually we should go ahead with it. Like, I don't know. I think now, even as we're like in the UK saying, oh, lockdown's being lifted, things are happening in person, people still aren't really comfortable to go out, and people, like, not everyone's vaccinated in the UK. So I think continuing on with digital program is really worth it. The way that institutions do digital program, though, really needs to change, and it really needs to be a bit more responsive and adaptive and thoughtful, because a lot of the time, a lot of the digital exhibitions I've seen have just been like people throwing things online for the sake of it, like just, oh, a film, it's on Vimeo, it's on our website, like it's here, it's there. Like it gets a bit boring after a while, and it feels like I'm writing about the same thing over and over and over again. And for an audience, like I have to look at that stuff because I'm a critic and I've got to fucking write about it. But if I was an audience member, I wouldn't give a fuck. Like, are you joking? Netflix is right there. YouTube is free. If you're going to spend time online, why would I spend it being bored to death by a contemporary artist? It really boggles my mind that institutions continue to work in that way online, when the online is like the wild, wild west. And there is no end of, I guess, there's no end of like content online that has been thoughtfully prepared to deal with its onlineness and its ability to engage people. Like YouTubers have been practicing clickbait and making engaging content for years, and the art world has learned nothing from it. I'd really like to see a gallery engage with like YouTubing or like vlogging in a meaningful way. But I mean, that's not to say that there isn't one institution in this entire world that's not doing that. Maybe I just don't know about it. But basically, I think it's better to revise concepts and enhance digital access. I would really like to see online exhibitions think about their onlineness a bit more and revise their approach to digital access, because I think that would be, regardless of lockdown, a good idea and would make things a bit more accessible. That is all the questions, and we've got about 10 minutes left, so that's quite well timed, no?
I don't know if there are any more questions, but please go ahead. If not, thank you so much for a very inspiring talk and for sharing all your secrets with us.
Yeah, for sure. They're happy to answer. And it's like one of those things we rarely get the chance to talk about, I guess, how it all works. So happy to be transparent and kind of spill the secrets, because the more people that are in on it, the better, I guess.
Yeah, we already discussed that we will use your talk as a benchmark for other artists, and to encourage them to be a little bit more open about their lives and how it really works for them. So really, thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you for having me. And yeah.
Yes, there are some. Oh, there is one more question actually, and we have time. So, yeah, there is one more. I can read it for you. Following my previous question on enhancing digital access, do you have any interesting ideas how to make online exhibition more? No, it's the same. I think it came up. It came up.
No, I think that's a different one. That's kind of, that's off the back of the last question. Yeah, how to make online exhibitions more attractive. I think I've seen some really good exhibitions online. I mean, I've written about a couple of them. One I will, maybe it's better for me to use examples. So let me pull it up actually. I think exhibitions that have dealt with their onlineness, basically, if they kind of engage with the fact that they are online rather than just being circumstantially online, that is normally like a good way to just immediately kind of navigate the awkwardness of the internet and the fact that there is a screen between you and your audience. So a really good one was an online exhibition called Internet of Things, Another World is Possible. It was hosted by I think it was like oh god, where was it? I think it was like an art space based in somewhere in the Middle East. I'm not sure. But it was called Darat Al Fanun, this gallery that hosted them, and that was really good just because it was kind of laid out like kind of like Pixo, to be honest, like with all these pages within pages within pages, and artists kind of curated themselves on these pages. They used the web page as not an exhibition space, but as canvas and like notepad, sketchbook. It was presented as an intermediary, like a halfway point, work in progress. And I think that kind of slapdashness, that playfulness with the medium made a real big difference. Conversely, like completely oppositely, I think one really good example that I haven't actually written about is the Mayday Rooms. The Mayday Rooms are an organization based in London. They are like an archive for trade unionist activity and radical meeting space, but they run a radio station now. And I mean, it's a radio station that exists only online. And I think they've done a really good job of making content that I engage with. Just, I mean, it's online and it's like sound only, and it's not a digital exhibition space per se, but like it's audio content that I listen to all the time. Like I will just put it on while I'm getting ready for bed and washing my face and like brushing my teeth, and like it fills a really nice space in my day, like when I'm just cooking my dinner and I just whack in my AirPods and listen to this like weird art content, and or you know, it just kind of like it fills a nice space because I don't have to be watching it. It's just sound. I can do other things, be busy with my hands. I think that's a really nice way to think about it. Like podcasts are an established medium, but like a still growing medium. I think that's a really clever way to deal with it. Maybe deal with the transience of your audience, or like their lack of attention span. Like take that into account. Another one I see do really well is Sad Grads, at Sad Grads. They are an Instagram account and they kind of exist as like a collective body for the class of 2020 across UK arts institutions. And they do a really good job of platforming young graduate artists that graduated last year. and putting them in touch with, like, they work as like an agency and also an exhibition space, like just plopping these artists and their work out there. And they, exist more as, I guess, in an activist sense, but because they've got that like drive of like wanting to advocate for a whole graduating class of people, it works quite well. I see them consistently on my feed, and they seem to be doing quite well in the algorithm, and people are seeing the work and engaging with it. So kind of works in an exhibitory sense a bit well. Yeah. But I think that kind of deals with the onlineness a bit more actively in the way that you mentioned. Yeah, transitions TV as well from Taishani. Maya says, how about transmissions TV from Taishani? And absolutely, like Taishani is an artist who I mentioned earlier, actually, and she runs like this collaborative drawing session, this collaborative drawing school, I guess, on Zoom. Is that the one that you're mentioning, Maya? I think so. Right. No, thank you for having me. And yeah, have a good evening, everyone.